The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
Oh my, one last blast of Indian summer. 80 today, 85 tomorrow. Supposed to be nice on Sunday. And then next week, actually Monday, we get a little reprieve too. We're in the 70s, but Monday the fall weather arrives. But boy, this is tremendous. And after the last couple of weekends of rain, it's nice that we're going to have a nice day tomorrow. Looking forward to riding my bicycle, which is what I like to do when the weather is nice. So looking forward to that. We will get into the Commanders and the Eagles coming up. Also, World Series, which starts tonight. We are your radio home for the World Series. Every game right here on ESPN 630. And pregame tonight will start at 7 o'clock. They say first pitch at 8 o'clock. They potski around for a little while, so maybe it's 8:15, whatever it is. But we'll have all of it for you here on ESPN 630, which is a really nice thing. Really, it's great to have baseball on the radio, particularly the World Series. I don't know if Dan Schulman is going to do it. I'm not sure. I think he left ESPN. So it could be Boog Shambi doing it, who also does a great job. But listening to World Series baseball on the radio, I remember the days of listening to Vin Scully. It was, like you turn down the TV and you listen to Scully. That's how great he was doing World Series on the radio. So that's going to be great for us throughout the weekend. That's tonight and tomorrow. And then next week when the series will shift to Arizona. And we'll get to that. And also, Robert Griffin said something yesterday that he put out on Twitter. And people say, well, forget about him. Leave him alone. Well, you leave him alone if he went off to have a private life. But he's had a very public life since he stopped playing, insisting that he can still play. And the only reason he's not playing is he creates too much of a distraction if a team brings him in. No, that's not the case. Nobody wants you anymore. You get hurt all the time. You're not any good. Not any good anymore. You were great in 2012. That was it. But he keeps saying these things in revisionist history form that I need to correct. And I will spend some time at 10 o'clock on what Robert Griffin III put out on Twitter yesterday. Jack Del Rio talked yesterday. Eric Bieniemy, Coordinators Day. We'll go through their comments and also take a look at what appears to be happening on the offensive line. It looks at the moment like Tyler Larson is going to take over as the starting center. I don't know how many other changes they're going to make, but something has to be done about an offensive line which has been a sieve. Again, not all of the sacks, the 40 sacks that Sam Howell has taken so far are the fault of the offensive line. Howell shares some blame in that. But if what you're doing isn't working, you got to make some changes. And as Ron Rivera said on Wednesday, everything is on the table, and we'll see what happens when they take the field on Sunday. It's Ravens Preview Day. We do that every Friday. Luke Jones of WNST will join us at 10:30. Also, we'll go through what Lamar Jackson said about this maybe being a trap game. This is a 1-6 team. They're playing on the road. You don't usually see a line like this, but the Ravens are 9.5-point favorites on the road at Arizona on Sunday. And what Lamar said about it being a trap game, we'll talk about that and a whole lot more. I want to start with this, and I don't know if anybody else is going to be talking about this today, and maybe you don't care, but I find these things to be like hidden nuggets of interest. And you don't have to care at all about high school football to, I think, be interested in this. We live in an era now where top talent is identified at a very young age. Kids are seen to be prodigies in whatever sport they're in, like by the time they're in the 6th or 7th grade, and they start being recruited. And the big-time high school programs, whether it's, basketball like DeMatha or St. John's, they start recruiting these kids. And football, same thing. DeMatha has a big-time program. St. John's has a big-time program. Gonzaga has a huge program, as evidenced by Caleb Williams, who's probably going to be the number one pick of the draft, coming out of USC this year. But the kids who play Montgomery County football, which is the level that I played at poorly many years ago, and I would think, too, in Virginia, this would be the case as well. The public schools generally not considered to be top prospects because they're skimmed off the top to go to places like Gonzaga and DeMatha. But we had a game last night where Gaithersburg played Richard Montgomery. And they do something different now than they did when I was in high school. In high school, as a matter of fact, it was only my junior year that they started the playoffs. Prior to that, Montgomery County didn't even have playoffs, no state championship, none of that. You played your 10 games, and then at the end of the season, people would look at you if you went undefeated and say, well, are you the best team in the area? That was a subjective vote. Now they play it out, and they have the championship, which I think is pretty close to Christmas now. It used to be like Thanksgiving weekend, and now it's later and later. But what they do now is they have every team play 9 regular season games, and then every team makes the playoffs. And to me, it smacks a little bit of participation trophy. I think there should be a reward for making the playoffs, not if you win like one game and you get in anyway. But that's how they, I guess, get everybody into the playoffs. Everybody's got a chance. And that's how that works now in Maryland. So last night was the final regular season game for both Gaithersburg and Richard Montgomery. And it's been a rough year for Richard Montgomery. They're 3-6, but they're still going. Whereas Gaithersburg has had a great year. They're 8-1 off last night's 48-37 win. But the point I want to make here is about the running back for Gaithersburg. His name is Gideon Atuka. He's 5'10", 240 pounds. Must have a lot of speed. I've never seen him play, never seen a picture of him, as a matter of fact. But 5'10", 240. I would imagine they'll try to slim him down a little bit in college, but he is a commit to Wisconsin. You don't see many kids coming out of Montgomery County signing with football programs of that stature. But it looks like he's worth it. Last night, Atuka ran for 382 yards, 5 touchdowns as Gaithersburg won the game. And over the 9 games this season, he has over 2,000 yards rushing. And he's obviously at a level that's higher than the talent that he plays against. And it's interesting how he slipped through the cracks. 29 rushing touchdowns this year, and the 2,000 yards. And it just reminded me when I was in Texas, I got the opportunity to do this. Now, Texas, the private school programs aren't quite what they are here. So a lot of these kids wind up staying in the public schools. In the public schools, football is such an important deal that you do get discovered by the big-time program. So I saw Eric Dickerson play for Sealy High School, small school in Texas, ran for 125 yards, and then sat out the second half with a sprained ankle. I mean, he was just awesome. I saw Gary Kubiak, who had a nice career in the NFL, was a great college quarterback at Texas A&M. Saw him play for a private school and to me, looked like Sonny Jurgensen, just at a different level. So what we saw last night, or those who were there, what we saw, because it wasn't televised, but those who were there saw Gideon Atuka have one of those games that people will talk about for a long time, and we'll talk about him for a long time as well after he's gone and following his career, how successful he's going to be at a level like Wisconsin. I can't imagine at 5'10", 240, that's how he's going to play out his career, but maybe he's 240 pounds of muscle. I don't know. Haven't seen him. So I found that to be a kind of a fun story. All right, World Series. And Bruce Bochy is the manager of the Texas Rangers. As you know, he had been the manager of the San Francisco Giants, retired after winning 3 World Series. The Giants had fallen off a little bit, and maybe he had worn out his welcome there. I don't know. Maybe he's conflicting with management, whatever. Or at 65, he thought he would try retirement, see how it worked. It didn't work for him, so when the Rangers called, he came back and has done a great job managing the team this year. But if you don't know, there's some real interesting local ties with Bruce Bochy. He was born in France, 1955. His father was in the Army, but when he was a young man, and I was trying to find the age when he came here, but he moved to Falls Church and went to, I think, a couple of years of high school before his father was transferred again down to Florida. And he finished up high school in Melbourne, Florida, played some junior college, a little bit of college baseball, I forget where, but wound up in the majors and, was a half-decent major league player, backup catcher, that kind of thing, probably stuck around 6 or 7 years. But when he was living in Falls Church, he delivered the Evening Star, which is really cool, and was a big Washington Senators fan. And his father just happened to be transferred the year that Washington left. So where did Washington go? Why, they went to Texas. So it wasn't like Bochy was necessarily missing Major League Baseball, though in Florida at that time there was no team. A lot of spring training down there in Melbourne, but no Major League team at that point. So, he wasn't going to have one if he stayed here anyway, and he winds up in Florida, and he's, become a big high school baseball star by then. But it's just, the irony of that. Growing up here, rooting for the Washington Senators at RFK Stadium, maybe DC Stadium before that, and then the team leaves, he leaves, and now he's back with the Texas Rangers as they're in the World Series with our local tie of Max Scherzer, who's probably going to get a start. In fact, I think we had Dave Barnett on yesterday. He said Scherzer's going to start Game 3 of the series, which will be back in Texas next week. So I thought that was really cool. And, if you wonder what makes Bochy such a great manager, what people will tell you is he's always calm in the face of chaos. But he also seems to have this, like, John Wayne-ish way about him. And this was from his news conference yesterday. Listen to this and tell me you wouldn't want to play for a guy like this with this kind of voice, with this kind of John Wayne look, with 3 World Series rings on his finger from the Giants, and just, how he's able to describe what it means to be playing in the World Series.
I mean, this is what you dream about. This is what you train for. It's what you sacrifice. It's what you play for. To have the ability to play on the biggest stage in baseball. And you have to savor it, be honored by it. It doesn't happen a lot. It's not easy to get here. So enjoy it. And so that's what I try to take away from it. Probably got better as I got a little older, because it's intense out there. But still, you just have to appreciate where you're at, and that's what I try to take in myself.
Well, I'd like to have him narrate something. With that voice, there's something that he could do if he wanted to. He's been very, very successful as a manager, and I'm sure will continue to do that for some time. Dusty Baker just called it a career at 74. Maybe Bochy hangs that long with the Rangers. We'll see. But I really, I got a chill up my spine listening to that. Now, here's another voice, not anywhere near Bruce Bochy, but one of the most important voices in sports over the last 35 years. I don't think that's an overstatement. I admire him very much personally and professionally. Chris Mad Dog Russo, who made himself the story this week, which you're not supposed to do, but he's not a journalist. He's an entertainer. And he said that he would retire on the spot, if the Phillies lost both games at home to Arizona, which they did. And once it happened, he went on the Howard Stern show, and he said, no, I'm not going to retire. And Stern said, well, at least you got to make a fool of yourself or something. So he hasn't quite done that yet, but he's been contrite about it. And then was talking yesterday on his show on High Heat on the MLB Network about the series, and took some playful shots at himself. Now, the Diamondbacks have used some of this for motivation. I don't know how much motivation plays a factor in baseball, to be honest with you. I think it's more about concentration and so forth. I think you can get yourself fired up to play a football game, maybe a basketball game, maybe a hockey game. I'm not sure it works that way in baseball. But they are using this as fuel, as they say. Manager Torey Lovullo says, nobody knows the magic that's sitting inside that clubhouse now. Nobody knows what we're capable of doing on a daily basis. Nobody knows how hard we're working to make today happen. And Buster Olney was on with Tony the other day, and he said, it's a well-worn cliche when a team wins something, moves on to a big series like the World Series or the Super Bowl, and said, nobody believed in us. Well, nobody believed in the Arizona Diamondbacks, including Russo, who said he would quit if they got to the World Series. But Lovullo went on to say, he said, I find it entertaining about these people who do this. He says, I get it. We just put it on our list and keep those receipts and walk around with a little bit more of a chip on our shoulder. It gives you a little bit more motivation, and when you can get a little bit more, you take it. Here's Russo yesterday on his show on High Heat with a preview of the World Series and knowing how everybody's got their ears perked up about what he says about the Arizona Diamondbacks.
Let's start with Eovaldi and Gallen. They'll be the two starters here. Let's obviously discuss Texas that struggled against Houston as far as home field is concerned, losing 3 straight games. A little layoff for the Rangers, less so for Arizona. But I don't think that will be a factor. The Rangers had a layoff before the Houston ALCS, and they won that first game in Houston. Remember, they had beaten the Orioles on a Tuesday, and they didn't play that first game on a Sunday. They seem to recover there okay. Arizona's in a perfect scenario. They won the 2 games in Philly. They had 2 days off, little workout today, so then, of course, tomorrow. So that should not be a problem. We've had plenty of World Series where teams go in there with a 6 or a 7-day layoff. The 07 Rockies, the 06 Tigers. I'll give you many examples who came out a little flat, little, out of rhythm. That should not be the case here with these 2 teams. I think the big picture is, listen, they're both flawed teams. Both have weakness. They're not the 98 Yankees, and which makes it fun. So as a result of that, I think you're going to see a long series. We all know about Texas's bullpen, spotty. We all know about Texas's depth of pitching. Scherzer, who knows? Spotty. We all know about Arizona. Not a great offensive team. We know Arizona necessarily, their depth of pitching a little shaky too. So as a result, you got some teams that have some weaknesses on both ends. You also have teams that have done the improbable. Nobody thought that Texas losing that last game to Seattle to be a wild card team after they led the division basically all year long would win 2 road games in Tampa, win 2 road games in Baltimore, win the first 2 games in Houston, and then come back and win 2 more down 3-2. Think about it. You got 2 participants in this World Series who were down 3-2 and had to play games 6 and 7 of the ALCSs and the NLCSs on the road and live to tell about it. I have to look historically, and it's only going back through 69 anyway, and 84 and 85 as far as best of 7s are concerned. I don't know if, in fact, that's ever occurred. So you have teams here with a lot of mojo getting into this series. And, of course, high wire acts. Texas in Houston. I know the Astros are bad at Minute Maid, but they were the defending champs. And who would have thought that Arizona, and you can raise your hand now if you're a media member, nonsense. Nobody thought Arizona would win 2 games in Philadelphia, 6 and 7. Whether what I said, who cares? Nobody in America thought that the Diamondbacks would win games 6 and 7 in Philadelphia, both games, to win the pennant. So that is a good sign, too. Mojo for both Texas and the Diamondbacks as we get ourselves organized here. I don't think any team is going to be out of it if they're down 2-0 or up 2-0. Arizona was down 2-0 to the Rangers. They came to the Phillies, and they came back 1-4 of 5. Texas was up 2-0 against Houston and had to go back to Houston to win 2 games to win the series. So I don't know even if the first 2 games are that symbolic, because I saw Arizona bounce back from 2-0, and I saw Texas be in major trouble when they were up 2-0. So I like that aspect of the series. So what I'm telling you is flawed teams, mojo, perfect rest, and obviously, scenarios where the first 2 games did not determine a winner. I think you're going to have yourself a long. I remember they played in the course of the year too. Recently, Texas was in Arizona in September. They didn't play well at all against the Diamondbacks. I think they got swept in that series out in Chase Field. So I think you have yourself the makings of a long series that might go the distance. This is going to be a weird series nationally, and let's just discuss this because everybody's going to be talking about this tomorrow. All right, going in, you got Texas and Arizona. Not many people know about the Diamondbacks. You have no East Coast representation, so we all know that. So that might take a little while to spur the country as far as interest is concerned. But World Series, look at Atlanta and Minnesota back in '91. World Series are about length and are about competitive games. If you have length, which I think very well you might with these 2 teams, and you have competitive games, why wouldn't you have competitive games? I mean, I know that Texas's offense can blow people out. They did, of course, Game 2 against the Orioles. They did just recently in Game 7 against Houston. But, you're going to have some competitive games. Arizona's got a good bullpen here, so you're going to have some competitive games. So if you have long competitive games, if you have a long series with competitive games, I don't care if the teams are from the moon and Saturn. People are going to watch. You're a sports fan, you're going to watch it. That's all there is to it. You're a sports fan. You like sports. Yeah, we know there's football, and nobody knows that more than me. But if there is some tension and there's competitiveness and you got length, you will have a heck of a World Series. And I think you're going to have both of the former. So if you have that, you're going to have viewers here at the tail, middle on the tail end. Listen, I'll give you a prediction tomorrow, but I am a lot of things, but I'm not a bandwagon jumper. So I am not going to jump on the bandwagon. So there you go. You think Arizona wants me to pick them? They'd be an idiot if they want me picking them. They seem to do well when I pick against them.
Yeah, so who does? Not a bandwagon jumper. So I guess he means he's not jumping on the bandwagon with Arizona. I love Russo. I think he's great at what he does, and I think baseball should make better use of him. He's got the energy that the sport needs. He loves the game. He knows the game. If I were Commissioner Rob Manfred, I'd put some heat on both the networks who cover the games. Actually, three of them with ESPN and Fox and Turner. I would say, hey, find a place for this guy because he gets people excited about baseball, and he was, maybe the biggest story of at least of a couple of days ago after the Diamondbacks won. So good for him. Good for Russo for stirring things up a little bit. Speaking of stirring things up, this offensive line disaster for Washington, where Ron Rivera said everything's on the table. We'll look at some of the possibilities heading into this game against Philadelphia on Sunday, what Eric Bieniemy said about last week's loss and his role in that, and much more as we continue with the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
All right, we got Tony coming up at 11 o'clock today, and in about 20 minutes, we'll look back 37 years ago today when the Mets won the World Series. It's been kind of clouded by Game 6 of that series, Mets and Red Sox, where twice the Mets were a strike away from losing that series. And, of course, you had the famous Mookie Wilson dribbler that went through Bill Buckner's legs. It was actually a tie game at that point. Buckner, I think, gets way too much of the blame on that. The late Bill Buckner, by the way. But that game is what everybody remembers from that World Series, one of the most famous baseball games that was ever played. And it was a full 2 days later before they played Game 7. And people also forget that the Mets were down to the Red Sox 3-0 in the fifth inning of that game. So, with all the drama and excitement of Game 6, history looks at it a little bit differently if the Red Sox are able to close things out. It's kind of like in 75 when you had the Carlton Fisk home run in Game 6 at Fenway Park, which extended it to Game 7, and same thing. The Red Sox actually had a lead in that seventh game before who was it? Whoever was the pitcher, Bill Lee, Spaceman Bill Lee, developed a blister on his hand, had to leave the game. Those days, if you were pitching well, you pitched the whole game, and maybe if he hadn't had the blister, he's able to close out the game. The Red Sox win, and the Fisk home run is even looked at differently. So, anyway, that's baseball history, and baseball history is about to be made once again, where you have the Texas Rangers and the Arizona Diamondbacks in a series going into nobody seems to care about outside of those two cities. But if you're just jumping in your car, I played a really good preview from Chris Mad Dog Russo, who says, look, these are not good teams. They're not great all-time teams. So that means you're probably going to have a fairly even match series, and series take on their own life as they go along. And if this is a long, competitive 7-game series, I think it will draw some interest as it unfolds in the next week and a half, 2 weeks. And also, in history, it may go down as one of the more entertaining ones. I'm sure the first game ratings tonight and tomorrow will not be very good. It's hard to get people interested in two teams they don't know anything about. But this could be fun because they are so evenly matched. All right, to the Commanders and the mess that's going on the offensive line. You can go back and forth as to how many of the sacks that Sam Howell has taken, the 40 of them, how much are his fault and how much are the offensive line's fault. But there's no question that they got worked last week against the Giants. And it's looking like the free agent signings they made were complete busts. Nick Gates, 3 years, $16.5 million. He's probably going to be benched for Tyler Larson, who was taking the first-team snaps from what the reporters were able to see in practice yesterday, and Andrew Wiley, the right tackle, who came over from Kansas City with Eric Bieniemy. This happens all the time. Coaches go from one place to another, and they take a player with them who's available. And Kansas City probably said to Bieniemy, "Hey, good luck, Eric. And while you're, it's like take the trash out, honey, when you go out the door. While you're going to Washington, take Wiley with you." And he did, and they gave him a lot of money. They gave him a $24 million 3-year contract, and he's been bad. So, as Ron Rivera said, anything is on the table. One of the things that could change anyway because of injury, Sadiq Charles has a calf strain, didn't practice yesterday, and may not be able to go on Sunday against the Eagles. Now, the other question you have is, what do you do about players who are healthy and are making money, like Gates and Wiley, when you don't have really good backups behind them? They drafted Ricky Stromberg in the 3rd round. He barely plays. I think he's played in like 26 snaps all year long. Braden Daniels, 4th round, he was supposed to be helpful in depth, and he hurt his knee, so he's out for the year. So, there's the question of putting all this money on the bench and also trying to reconfigure a line halfway through a season and, the chemistry that they would have to develop. I mean, there's all kinds of different things that go into it, which, may indicate they're going to roll out pretty much what they have minus Sadiq Charles, unless he miraculously, unless he's able to get himself healthy in time to play on Sunday. This is Bieniemy from yesterday. He opened his news conference, and Thursday is the day that the coordinators talk. So you get Bieniemy and Del Rio every Thursday, and they have 2 different styles. Bieniemy says a lot of words and doesn't say anything. Del Rio says very few words and doesn't say anything. They both mastered that. But Bieniemy gives you this optimistic feel. I'm sure the way he talks to the media is somewhat like he talks to the players, though not on the practice field where he's cussing them out and being tough on them. But he's stressing positive all the time. And when things go wrong, this is the Joe Gibbs way too. When things go wrong, he takes the blame, not the players. And the players appreciate that. I think that's why the Gibbs teams always played well at the end of the year, because he never threw them under the bus. Anything that was a problem was his problem, not theirs. And so this is kind of what Bieniemy likes to do. And he, again, had opened the news conference yesterday saying that it was his fault and he needed to coach better, and went on to say more about the same thing.
I got to do a better job. Our coaching staff got to do a better job of making sure that our guys are mentally and physically prepared. Each and every week, we're always evaluating what we need to do. So that's basically where we are.
With regards to the sacks, we've talked a lot about Sam holding the ball, things like that. This game, it felt like they were just getting there quick, and he didn't have time to react. Was there something different about this type of pass rush that was a different complication for you guys than other weeks?
Just like I said, first and foremost, I got to make sure that we're getting ready, okay? Second of all, it's my job to make sure I'm making the necessary adjustments and doing all the little things that needs to be done to helping us to be at our best. So we'll keep evaluating and we'll keep it moving forward.
Again, the Bieniemy drinking game. Make sure, again, anything in there that really stands out to you other than we got to do a better job? Well, not really. And it's usually the same thing. We got to be on the same page. We got to communicate. We got to know exactly what we need to do. Now, he stopped saying, and he said this the first few weeks, even when they started losing games after the 2-0 start. He said, we're right where we want to be. I'm not saying that anymore. They're not where they want to be. They're 3-4, and they're leaking oil as an offense. But, again, more positive from Bieniemy about the fact that everybody is seeing the same thing.
I think all of our guys are on the same page, and I'll just say this. From where we started that game to where we finished, that just goes to show you exactly the page that they're on. Because one thing I do know about these guys, they're going to fight. You know, the results may not have come out the way we expected them to. But when it's all said and done with, these guys are close-knit. They're very good friends. On top of that, it's important to them. If it's important to them, I know we have a chance.
Okay. So that was good. Yeah, I mean, they did compete at the end of that game. Now, one of the things from last Sunday, was that the game plan in the first half was complete doo-doo. It stunk. And in the second half, especially that last drive was like 8 minutes. And they were doing what they should have been doing the whole game. Now, they couldn't get it in the end zone, and they had to get it in the end zone at that point because the clock was running down. But what they were doing was more of what they should have been doing in the first half. And the question is, why weren't they able to adjust quicker in the first half? Howell said, well, we script a lot of plays, and, we practice all this, and it's just hard to change course right in the middle of a half. I don't know if I buy that, but that could also be part of the learning curve for Eric Bieniemy as a play caller, and certainly part of the learning curve for Sam Howell, who's about to start his, 9th game in the NFL. Played 7 this year, 1 last year, 1 meaningless game. Everybody who wanted to read into last year's win over disinterested Dallas to say, oh, look at Sam Howell, they got one. Yeah, jury's still out there, so we'll have to see. Deion Sanders talking yesterday. This is fun. Deion owned the sports world in September, right? I mean, when they came out of the gate and they won their first game at TCU, which played for the national championship last year, how he just captivated the country. Wow, look, hey, Deion's not a joke. And there were people who had said things like they've got the worst roster and they they're going to be an embarrassment, and Deion can't bring all of his players over from Jackson State and expect to win at this level. And they've leveled off. They're 4-3. They're probably going to lose again this week. They're playing number 24 UCLA at the Rose Bowl. UCLA's having a good year. They're 5-2, but he's still fun. He's still entertaining. And as he said about getting his butt whipped a couple of times, he said, you better get me now because this is as bad as we're going to be. So, Deion knows how to do what he's doing. I think he's a good coach, and I think he's got the right idea in today's game as to how to build a program, not just with his sons, who are 2 of the biggest stars on the team, but also to get other players to come there. And I think Colorado's going to be a force in the years to come. But he does the weekly coaches show. Most coaches do that. And he's doing a show last night in Boulder, the weekly Colorado football coaches show. I guess they do it at a sports bar or something. And the host of the show, his name is Mark Johnson. So he asked Deion about whether he fishes for catfish, and what the way you do it. It's called noodling. You get your hand in the mouth of a catfish and you kind of wrestle them around and you bring them to shore. You reach into the catfish holes hoping they bite, and it can lead to bruising and some cuts on the arm. I mean, it's a physical sport. So the host asked Johnson about it, asked Deion, about it, and Deion said, there are 3 things that black folks don't do. We don't deep sea dive. We don't bungee jump. We ain't noodling, all right? We don't do that. He says, I hate catfish. He says, catfish take all your bait food. They eat every darn thing. They get on your nerves. So let me say this. I certainly cannot speak for black folks. I am not a black person, but I am Jewish. And I think we're all aligned with what Deion says here. Deep sea diving, Jacques Cousteau, that's for him. Jacques Lipschitz, I don't think that's the way he's going to go. Bungee jumping? Nah, I don't think so. And noodling? Catfish? Are you kidding me? Gefilte fish, yes, but catfish? No, wouldn't do that. He said, Deion said that he had a friend when he was playing with the Falcons who would do noodling, and he said he'd asked him about his bruised arm, and he told me what he did. He says, ain't no way. He said he'd seen someone do it on a ranch. Now, he does like to fish, and I know this from Rob Dibble. Yes, Rob Dibble, who was a teammate of Deion's with the Reds, and so he was able to he was able to go fishing with Deion a bunch of times in his boat. He said on off days Deion would take him out. He was a great friend and used to do those kind of things. Deion says he doesn't fly fish. He says, I'm fly while I fish. I don't do fly fishing. He said, fly fishing is too much work for the arm. I might as well play tennis if I'm going to do all that. And he ranks deep sea diving right along with noodling. He says, we ain't going down there. Ain't nothing down there I want to see. So Deion is still entertaining. This football team isn't quite the story that it was, but that is all part of what goes on there. So I thought that was fun from last night. And speaking of TCU, which I was just speaking of here a moment ago, with TCU opening up the season and losing at home to Colorado, there's now a report, and this goes into this Michigan story of the sign stealing. Yahoo's Ross Dellinger reporting this, that you remember last year in the playoff, Michigan played TCU before TCU won the game and went on to absolutely destroy it in the national championship game by Georgia. But remember, Michigan was a favorite in this game. I mean, Michigan much higher level than TCU, which was a big surprise last year. And apparently, according to what Ross Dellinger is reporting for Yahoo, in order to mess with the Wolverines, the Horned Frogs changed their signs before the kickoff. The coaches also used dummy signals, which were old plays that no longer ran with that signal. TCU players had to ignore the signals. He says, sometimes we froze a play before the snap, a TCU coach told Dellinger. We'd call a play, and then we'd signal in another play and an old signal, but we told our players to run the original play. TCU ended up winning the playoff game 51-45 to advance to the championship game, which they eventually lost to Georgia. According to the report, TCU coaches were alerted to Michigan sign stealing before their matchup against the Wolverines in the college football playoff. And literally everybody we talked to knew, one unnamed coach told Dellinger, they'd just say, just like, they steal your signals. They're going to have everything, so you better change them. The NCAA, of course, has opened up the investigation into this. So what may have happened here is in that playoff game last year, Michigan may have outsmarted itself. And if we played this earlier this week, let me see if I can find it now. It was when Mike Locksley held his news conference. I think it must have been Tuesday, and so he was actually asked about this. Here it is, and he was asked about the Michigan sign stealing. They're going to play them next month. They've got the game against Northwestern on the road tomorrow at noon. But listen to what Locksley says about being prepared for the Michigan sign stealing.
I was surprised because, I didn't know anything about it. Didn't bother me. It goes on in college football now, maybe not as elaborate as maybe that, but I'm saying, we're a team that's a no-huddle team, so we signal a lot. We have all types of anti-spying techniques where we switch who's the lead signal guy, who has what. It's not anything that I knew about. Don't know if it had any effect in anything we've done.
Knowing what you know and knowing that you play them later next month, will that cause you to alter the way you do differently?
Yeah, we'd have to. We'd have to decide whether we want to wristband things, whether we change our signals based on if someone has them. Those things do come into play, but I'm more concerned about Northwestern than I am worrying about Michigan down the road.
Okay, so he's going to be prepared for it, and I guess he knows that Michigan's got their signals. Now, you're not hearing a lot of coaches kick up a big fuss about this because everybody's probably doing some form of it. Maybe not to the level that Michigan is, but you haven't heard anybody say, oh, my God, somebody's got to look into this. This is horrible. Nah, they're just sort of laying low, hoping that there's no investigation of them. It's the old if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. So that was Locksley the other day, and that's just rich. If TCU was on to Michigan, and that's what the difference in the game was, good for them. Coming up, we'll get to what Robert Griffin III put out yesterday, plus Ravens preview as the Ravens get set to play at Arizona on Sunday. Stay with us. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. Heading into another big football weekend. Maryland trying to get bowl eligible tomorrow with a noon kickoff at Northwestern. And how about Virginia? I don't think they got enough attention for what they did last week. North Carolina was undefeated. They got Drake May, who could wind up being the number one pick of the draft. He's going to go no later than maybe 3. And Virginia had not won a game other than William and Mary at home all year, and understandable off the horrible tragedy last year where a former player shot and killed 3 of his former teammates and wounded another one. He's come back to play this year, but it's been a cloud that's hung over them all year long. And God, how great that must have felt last week to win that game. It's one of the biggest upsets in recent years in college football. There's so much attention now on what Deion Sanders does, and now Michigan stealing the spotlight with the sign stealing. People are paying attention to that, but that was huge for Virginia, and let's see if they can keep it going tomorrow as they have a 3:30 kickoff at Miami, and coverage here will get underway at 2:30. We also got the World Series, so if you're looking for World Series on the radio, we got all of it, and it starts tonight with pregame at 7 o'clock. They also play tomorrow, and I love listening to baseball on the radio, and World Series is top of the line there. That's as good as it gets for baseball on the radio. All right, let me get to this. Because we're going to do Ravens preview at 10:30. Luke Jones will join us from WNST. Ravens huge favorites on the road. They seemed to hit their stride last week when they blew out the Lions 38-6. And another great game for Lamar Jackson, throwing for 357 yards, 3 touchdowns, ran for another score. Having a great year. He's completed 71% of his passes for 1,600 yards, 8 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. He's also run for 363 yards and 5 scores. So he's in the MVP conversation. He has the spotlight. Well, when there's the spotlight, Robert Griffin III can't be far behind. He seeks out the light like a moth to a flame. So you know he's got history with the Ravens. He was the backup quarterback there for 3 years. And when he got to play, what happened? He got hurt, which is his move. That's why he's not in the league anymore, along with other things. But he just couldn't stay healthy. And remember, he played in a game against, I guess it was Pittsburgh. Did he play against, was it the Washington game, Rex, that he got hurt?
No, it was that Pittsburgh one on like a Tuesday, Wednesday night.
Okay, yeah. I guess he was scheduled to start against Washington the following week, something like that. Yeah, so he was always out. Okay, so he sees what's going on with Lamar. Now, this isn't Griffin quoted in an interview, maybe out of context. He has his own podcast now. So these are things that he says on his own. On top of that, he took this comment that he made yesterday and he put it out on Twitter, on his own Twitter account, as if to say, hey, look at what I'm saying here. Look at what I'm saying against Lamar. Now, it starts out with incredible humbleness. Oh, this was so... He'll say this, you'll hear this, that he felt that being a backup to Lamar when Lamar won the MVP in 2018 was a bigger deal than him in 2012 when he was the Rookie of the Year when they won the division. Okay, he's actually going to say that. You're going to hear that here. And it sounds like, okay, maybe he's just that humble and you can't get inside his head. Maybe he believes that's a bigger deal, Lamar winning the MVP. But then he gets around to what he really wants to get around to, and that is RG3, the victim. So let's play what Robert Griffin III posted on Twitter yesterday about Lamar Jackson being in the MVP conversation, and then we will dissect.
One of my greatest accomplishments as an NFL player wasn't us winning the division in 2012 or being Rookie of the Year or being a Pro Bowl QB. One of my biggest accomplishments was in 2019 when Lamar Jackson won MVP. And I got to be a part of that, watch him grow from being a rookie to a second-year player, watching him go from being the guy that was, supposed to be the next guy to being the guy and just obliterating the league in 2019, winning the MVP, throwing for, I think, 36 touchdown passes. To be a part of that and watch his growth over that time period, I'm very, very proud of that because I never had that in my quarterback room when I was the starting quarterback for the Commanders. I never had that type of support, a guy that had been through what I had been through, had played the game the way that I played the game and could help me understand certain things at a better clip, faster, and to not repeat those same mistakes. Lamar got that. He got that from a guy like myself who played the game the way that he played it from a dual threat perspective. Nobody plays the game like Lamar. He plays Lamar ball.
Bobby, Bubba. Okay, I'll give you the fact that they didn't have a quarterback with similar skills on the roster when you had your magical season in 2012. Kirk Cousins, different kind of quarterback. The third string quarterback was Rex Grossman, and he was an interception machine. Gambler, Didn't run very much. Wasn't very good at running. Okay, so he wasn't the dual threat that you were. I'll give you that. But don't talk about support. Okay, support is a joke. That's an absolute joke. You know the coaching staff, the offensive coaching staff for the Redskins in 2012? Mike Shanahan, who had 2 Super Bowl championship rings when he came to town, along with his son, who you might have noticed is one of the rising stars in the business, if not the star. He's taken San Francisco to the Super Bowl, had them in the championship game last year before an unthinkable happened, that he lost his 4th-string quarterback with an elbow injury. He didn't have anybody to play at the end of the game. The offensive, and he was the offensive coordinator on that team, Kyle Shanahan. Matt LaFleur was the quarterback's coach. Matt LaFleur, you may have noticed, is the head coach of the Green Bay Packers. The tight ends coach was Sean McVay. Sean McVay, you may have noticed, Robert, has taken the Rams to 2 Super Bowls, winning one of them. And the offensive assistant, I don't know how much help he was to you that season, his name is Mike McDaniel. And he's got an offense that may be revolutionizing the NFL right now. So this support that you didn't have during this season, you know where you looked for support? You look for support from the owner, who undermined your head coach and who destroyed that whole situation, which, if you look at the staff that Mike Shanahan had put together, had they been able to keep it together with you as the quarterback, and had you wanted to learn the pro system and evolved in the right way, it could have been a long-term run. We could be looking at the part of this now where they're saying, can the Commanders win their 5th Super Bowl in 7 years now? Yeah, Mike Shanahan's getting a little older. Maybe he's going to turn the reins over to Kyle. You know, all that kind of stuff. No. I didn't have the support. Poor me. Lucky Lamar, he had me. God, you just stop. Stop all that. You know, you're really good on TV. Griffin does a really good job. But it's becoming more and more about him. And as he looks at success of other people, the jealousy just burns. And he keeps talking about, people are calling me, if the right situation comes along. He admitted he called the Jets. Jets weren't interested in talking to him. He said to Dan Patrick that he got a call, or let's see, how did he term it? Because Patrick asked it in a way which left some ambiguity there. But he said something like he was in contact with another team in the middle of August. Maybe he left a message and somebody from the team called back and said, yeah, Bob, we're not interested. I don't know. But stop this. Just stop this. And what happened to you was your own doing in 2012. Remember, he got hurt against Baltimore. He collided with Haloti Ngata. His knee went one way, a way it shouldn't have gone. Hyperextended knee. Dragged himself back on the field. Finally, they took him off. Cousins won that game in overtime. Cousins starts the following week at Cleveland, wins the game. Griffin sits in the stands with his dad, and they decide that Mike Shanahan is trying to undermine his career, get him hurt so Kirk Cousins could play. Comes back, says, these are the plays I'm not going to run. Shanahan says, well, those are the plays that have made us a winner this year. So if you're going to play, that's what we're going to do. Otherwise, we're going to play Kirk. Oh, no. He got back on the field. And Alfred Morris actually got them to the playoffs. The 2 games that Griffin played against Philly and Dallas, it was Morris who was doing all the work. He got 200 yards in that clinching game against Dallas to win the division last day of the season. And Griffin insisted on staying in the game when he was clearly hurt against Seattle. And they tried to take him out. He would not leave. He refused to leave the game. NFL Films picked up sound of him saying to Trent Williams, hey, I hurt my knee. Don't tell anybody. So, what happened to you? And it wasn't all injury either. It was that you just never picked up the system. And your whole offseason was dedicated to showing everybody what great shape you were, dragging around tires, doing pull-ups, making a video for Gatorade, all that stuff. So just stop this stuff. Just stop this notion that you got screwed here. The only reason that you really were that successful as a rookie is the Shanahans were smart enough to design an offense which fit your skills coming out of college. They knew they weren't going to be able to develop you quickly enough to be a good NFL drop-back passer coming out of college because you hadn't done it. You hadn't done it before. You hadn't even huddled. Hadn't had a playbook. Everything was sent in from the sidelines. And now, but make sure that, as you look at Lamar right here, developing into maybe another MVP this year, make sure you know who made him, because, I was the guy who was able to tell him, hey, don't do that. Did you tell him not to undermine your coach with the owner? Not that Steve Bisciotti would do anything like Dan Snyder would do. Did you tell him not to do that? Did you tell him when you got hurt that maybe you should have told people about that? Maybe you should have come out of the game with a 14-0 lead and maybe let Kirk finish it out. But no, you're too insecure for that. It wasn't going to happen. So stop, Bobby. Enough. Do your TV. You're good at that. Stay with that. All right. To Jack Del Rio, and this again was coordinator day yesterday. Del Rio speaks less time than Bieniemy, but neither one of them really says anything. But I pulled a few things that we can look at as they get ready for this game on Sunday against Philadelphia. The line is now moved to 7, so the Commanders are 7-point underdogs heading into this game. And also, you've got the decision to be made coming up on Tuesday. Are you going to keep this roster intact, or are you going to make some trades based on next year? And if you're Ron Rivera, you're probably not going to be here next year, so you're going to want to try and win as many games as you can this year. And if he has complete say over that, the trades probably won't happen unless ownership steps in and says this is what you need to do. Now, ownership has made a move. I think this is really the most significant move that has been made since Josh Harris took over. He has hired an analytics guy. His name is Eugene Shen, Senior Vice President of Football Strategy, to oversee all analytics and software development for football operations. And he's going to report to his new boss, Ron Rivera. All the moves that are made in the organization are made with the blessing of Rivera. This is a move he's obviously not making. This is an ownership move. So this could be really the first big move that indicates, okay, the big boys are moving in and things are about to change. So in the middle of a season, it's an odd time to make this hire, but Eugene Shen is taking over as this position on November the 6th. Meantime, about the trade rumors, mainly the two defensive ends, Chase Young and Montez Sweat. According to Nikki Jabala of the Post, a firm offer has been made for Sweat. No word if they're interested in making that deal. And then Young has drawn some interest. This was Del Rio, who again says nothing, but asked about the trade rumors, said this.
Well, I think the best offer we had was a ham sandwich for me with no mustard. So we're going to pass on that. That's different. We didn't have that when I played, so I never experienced it as a player. As a coach, it's not something that I'm in charge of. Those kind of discussions are for other people. So, I don't have much to add to that.
Yeah, I would expect the Sergeant Schultz approach from Del Rio. This is locker room sound from yesterday. It's Chase Young and Montez Sweat on the trade rumors.
I don't think about it at all. I'm just focus on the Eagles.
Because obviously your name will always come up, right? Have you talked to anybody here about any of that?
Well, my name been popping up since I've been here, regardless of a trade, so I ain't tripping about none of that.
Trade deadline's coming up next week. How much do you think about that much?
I mean, with everything going on, it definitely goes across your mind. But I mean, you try to keep your head focused on what's ahead, and that's Philly. So yeah, we focus on that right now.
Obviously, your name, Chase, name always comes up because of the value position, all that. Do you talk to anybody here? Have you talked to anybody here about when your name pops up or?
What you mean, as far as the front office, or?
Yeah, coaches, front office, anybody.
Yeah, I didn't have no type of conversations with nobody. We just come here, go to work, man, and we get a job done. So.
When you do hear about it, is it you checking online or people telling you stuff?
Yeah, it's conversations I have with my agency. They tell me what's going on and what's not going on and stuff like that. Try to keep me ahead of the curve, but other than that, we focus on Philly.
Knowing it's not up to you, I mean, do you want to stay here?
I mean, I can only control what I control. I definitely enjoy my time here with the guys in the D-line, people on the team, but I understand it's a business. But so I can only control what I can.
Yeah, okay. So neither one of them is going to say. You expect that. The question is, if you're going to deal one, which one do you deal? Young has been hurt so much. My feeling is I would trade him. I would get what you can. Sweat, you might really consider re-signing. They had to trade up to get him because of the Haskins deal, ridiculous. And then he's a guy who's managed to stay healthy. He's older. He's a couple of years older, so maybe that plays into this. But I would definitely deal Chase Young if I was going to deal one of them. How about you, Rex? Which way would you go?
I would trade Montez.
You would?
Yeah. I mean, Chase's ceiling is so much higher.
I know, but he's proven that he doesn't heal fast. And once a guy's been hurt, it's unusual. It happens, but it's unusual that he goes a long way without being hurt again.
He had one bad injury.
Yeah.
Montez has proven that he's a single sack guy. He's not getting double-digit sacks in a year.
Oh, you mean single-digit sacks, like you get 9.
Yeah.
Not one sack, but 9.
Yeah, right.
Okay. But again, Young, now you're projecting if he stays healthy, but Young is going to play a maximum of 16 games this year. Do you think he's going to get double-digit sacks? He might. He's played very well recently.
Yeah, I mean, and also the equation gets thrown off because they're both in there. So that's
yeah, that's true. But one helps the other too. That's another. Remember when they had J.J. Watt and Jadeveon Clowney?
Yeah,
both in Houston. That was supposed to be, and one of them was always hurt. So that was a problem there. So I go with health, and that's why I would keep Sweat and I would re-sign him. But if I had to bet, I would say neither one's going to be dealt at the deadline because you just can't get enough for them. That's the problem. And if you can get a third rounder for either one, I'd take it. But I don't think that's going to be the case. More from Del Rio and Cody Barton, who hasn't really had a great year, is playing with a bad ankle, and if he plays at all, he's going to be limited. So most likely he's going to be out on Sunday. And Del Rio was asked about playing without his signal caller.
What do we say? Next man up. I mean, that's what it has to be, right? So for us, Dave is the guy. He stepped in last week, played pretty solid for us. And they're a little different in what they bring, but Dave is the guy that'll play a little bit more.
I don't know if it's a state secret then, but with Cody out, does that mean David Mayo would have the green dot, or would it be somebody else like a Cam Curl who's on the field basically every play?
Yeah, it'll be somebody else that's on the field every play.
Yeah, he likes to play those games. It's going to be David Mayo who called the signals. I don't know how much of a difference that'll make. Barton has not had a great year, but it looks like that's going to be the case with Mayo calling the signals Sunday. Last thing is the tush push, which everybody talks about when they play Philadelphia. And there have been various theories as to how to stop this. Joe Thomas was on with Rich Eisen this week, Hall of Fame tackle. And he talked about, basically stacking bodies, because what happens is everybody goes low, and then Jalen Hurts is able to kind of body surf over them and get in the end zone. So you want to stack some people in the middle to do that. Del Rio is obviously not going to go into any depth if he's got a strategy for stopping it. And it sounds like he's got his hands up in the air. He doesn't really know what to do about the tush push.
I think the combination of the line, the quick center, the quarterback with the 1,000-pound squat, whatever it is. I mean, you add all these factors, they add up. They do it better than anybody else in the league right now. That's just what it is. We'll take our shot at it, but we hope to keep them out of those situations. The less push tush or whatever the heck it is, the less of that we line up against, the better.
Yeah, well, that's the key, keeping them out of short yardage. But as Nick Sirianni, the coach, says, we start every series 1st and 9, which is pretty much the case. A couple of things basketball related, and we got Ravens preview coming up in a few minutes. One, Wizards play their home opener tomorrow night. They were putrid defensively the other night against Indiana. Who knows how they'll look tomorrow against Memphis. But Tom Lavero wrote about this today, about how things are different now around Capital One Arena than they have been, let's say, 10, 12 years ago. And some of it is the crime that has been occurring around there, and it's not quite the cozy downtown place it used to be. Capitals are playing there tonight, and they've already played a couple of games at home. So this is not like the winter unveiling of the arena. But as Libero writes about tomorrow night, he said it should be a festive atmosphere and welcome one, because these days downtown Washington and the location surrounding Capital One Arena is no longer an urban revival model to be celebrated. It is a neighborhood that is fighting for survival. Empty storefronts, vacant restaurants, petty theft, harassment, and the smell of marijuana in the air. It's not a wasteland by any means, but it's not the commercial glory days either. The Post reported that the district's commitment to police presence during games has decreased from 27 to just 3. Now, part of that is not getting enough people who want to be police officers. That's a big part of it. And that now they're having to lean on private security for that. He says Ted Leonsis' Monumental Sports Company has paid off-duty officers to be there. Sources have said the city and Monumental have also made a trade deal for more officers in exchange for recruiting advertising in the building for the chronically understaffed Metropolitan Police Department. So there's a lot of things at play here. At a public meeting in Chinatown in August, a representative from Monumental Sports, the Leonsis company that runs the Wizards, Capitals, and Mystics, complained about open-air drug transactions near the arena, according to the Post, and Republicans in the U.S. House have scorched the Bowser administration's handling of the spike in robberies and carjackings and homicides in the city. And Ted was dangling this idea of having an arena built, and I think it would be he wouldn't even be paying for it, that it would be built in Arlington, Virginia, and that got the city, off its tuchus, and now they're looking to give him what he wants, $400 million in improvements in the arena. It's been open since 1997, and then Tom goes on to write, how successful it was at the beginning, 1997-98 first season. They opened late, they opened December because they had couldn't get everything done in time. They opened up December of 97. And the Wizards drew almost 20,000 a game, 6th in the league, but attendance dropped dramatically in the years that followed to about 15,000 a game, and the transformation of the surrounding downtown area that city officials hoped was slow to materialize. Then Jordan comes in 2001. They're selling out the arena every game, but they have now struggled in attendance, part of it due to the fact that the Wizards haven't been very good, and the Capitals, it's been now, 2018, so 5 years since they won the Stanley Cup. Last year, the Wizards reported average attendance of 17,328 a game, 21st in the NBA, but they finished last in the league in percentage of filling the building at 84%. And he says with the team in rebuilding mode, that's not likely going to be much of a party atmosphere at Wizards games this year, but they want you to feel safe downtown. That's a little snarky remark there. So there's that, and that's not something that people really think about a lot. And the pandemic, I think, had a lot to do with these restaurants closing down, so there's not as much, traffic of people going out for other things besides basketball and hockey. So that's a problem that they have to look at, and hopefully that will get shored up in years to come. The other story from the NBA, this is the bizarreness of the league. They came up with this new plan this year to keep teams from giving their star players days off, especially when you have national television games. So what's been going on with James Harden and the 76ers. He's been a complete pain in the butt. He's not showing up for 10 days because of quote-unquote personal reasons, just didn't show up. And knowing that you get paid for the games, Harden shows up for the team plane and basically, hey, let me on the team plane here. And then security says, no, you can't get on. No, we're not doing that. They were worried about if he was in shape. And also, I guess they just don't want him being around the team. Now, the talks to trade him to the Clippers where he wants to go, those are stalled right now. So they're going to pay him, but they don't want him around the team. So he did not travel with them. And last night they played in Milwaukee. They lost. Dame Lillard, by the way, had a huge game in his first game for the Bucks last night. And so now, this is crazy, the league is looking at the Harden availability to determine whether an approved reason exists for his lack of participation, according to league spokesman Michael Bass. Well, I don't know what you do if you're the Sixers here, because you got to say, hey, you can't just show up after missing 10 days and get on the plane to get paid. It seems to me, in this case, a $100,000 fine is not warranted here. Harden wants out. This is what he does. This is his move. He comes someplace, he wears out his welcome, wants to leave, wants to go where he wants to go, and then becomes a problem here. So I don't blame the Sixers for not letting him get on the plane. And the NBA, I think, has got to look at this as extenuating circumstances and say, look, this wasn't the team, because the team decision, yes, to hold him out of the game was related to Harden, but it was not related to the load management idea of not playing him to rest him. I mean, they've really gotten themselves in a complete mess
I was really taken with what Adam Silver did as soon as he became commissioner with the Donald Sterling situation with the Clippers. Kicked him right out of the league. Tough guy. But ever since, the players have taken complete control. The players play where they want to play. They play with who they want to play with. The load management thing, well, maybe it's team, maybe it's player. Who knows? But it's not working out well, and this is just a shining example of that, where a player becomes so much of a problem the team doesn't want him around, and the league goes, "Ooh, wait a minute, we need him for national television." Well, how can you conceivably? You got to understand as a coach, this happens at any level of sports. At a high school team, if the star player doesn't show up for practice for 3 days, he can't just show up for the game and play. Sometimes it works that way, but it's not supposed to work that way, and shouldn't work that way in the NBA either.